What's for dinner? Jackson's words pierced the silence of our tense kitchen, his tone cold and dismissive as always. I froze, the venom in his voice draining the joy from my soul once again. How far we had fallen from those early dreamy days in Chicago when his smile filled me with delight. Now every word he uttered struck me with dread. I said nothing, responding only with silence. My hatred for the stranger Jackson had become sitting like a stone in my heart. He clicked his tongue, shaking his head as he strode out, granting me a few more minutes of hollow peace. My thoughts drifted to 5 years ago, when Jackson would surprise me with flowers and gifts, when our newborn son Eli would gaze at us like we held the secrets of the universe. I remembered the perfumed scent of happiness that seemed to follow us wherever we went. How blinded I was by illusions. The shrill ring of my phone cut through the silence. My mother-in-law, Eleanor, no doubt ready to yet again make veiled accusations about my failings as a wife and mother. "Avalon, I haven't seen my precious Eli in over a week," Eleanor complained. "I miss my darling boy." Her words were sweet, but her meaning clear. She wanted to see Eli without me sullying their visit. My role was to produce her prized grandchild, then vanish into the background. "We can arrange something soon," I said evenly, refusing to grovel at her feet and beg for scraps of affection. I would not let her control me any longer. That weekend, I planned an escape with Eli to visit my parents' farm, desperate for even a day's reprieve from the choking venom of Jackson and his manipulative mother. As soon as we arrived, Eli relaxed into the warm embrace of my parents, free from the smothering weight of the Stanhopes' expectations. Yet Jackson still found a way to ruin even this small oasis of peace. His barrage of demanding calls reminded me I did not have the luxury of freedom. I was trapped, bound by vows and violence. My only hope was Eli, my beloved boy, whose smile sustained me. As long as I had him, I could survive anything. When we returned, Eleanor's talons were out. She scolded Eli for being away so long, glaring at me as if I had committed an unforgivable sin by spending a weekend away. My son's eyes pooled with tears as she smothered him. This was my life now, a battlefield where my only ammunition was patience and resilience. I had to stay strong for Eli. Little did I know Jackson had schemes of his own brewing as he spun his web of lies against me. My friend Harper called, gushing about this amazing new widower she was seeing. My blood turned to ice when she described her whirlwind romance with none other than Jackson himself. Rage, betrayal, and humiliation tore through me like shrapnel. For this final treachery, Jackson would pay the ultimate price. My hands trembled as I set my phone down, Harper's bubbly voice still echoing in my mind. The initial shock gave way to anger as the reality of Jackson's betrayal sank in. My husband, the man I had built dreams with, now wooed my own friend behind my back. I had to warn Harper, though exposing Jackson's deception would no doubt ignite his rage towards me. My son Eli played on the living room floor as I composed myself before making the call, drawing strength from his innocence. "Avalon, I was just talking about you," Harper chirped. I cut through her enthusiasm sharply. "The man you're seeing, what's his name?" Jay Stanhope. Why do you ask?" she replied, surprise coloring her tone. Bile rose in my throat as my suspicions were confirmed. Jackson had spun a web of lies, preying on Harper's longing for love. I exposed his deception plainly, my voice quivering with anger and pain. A heavy silence followed, the weight of betrayal hanging between two friends. When I told Jackson I had uncovered his deceit, his expression hardened to stone. Eleanor watched with thinly veiled amusement as he exploded. "You had no right to meddle in my affairs," he bellowed. "Harper meant nothing, but your jealousy has cost me a valuable business connection." His callous words deepened the chasm between us. I was no longer his wife, just an obstacle to be demolished. Eleanor smirked, the chaos only furthering her twisted hold over her damaged son. In that moment I understood. It was time to leave. There was nothing left to salvage here. I had only endured this emotional warfare for my son's sake, but now I realized no child should see his mother thus degraded. As Jackson's tirade continued, I calmly packed our bags, comforting my confused and frightened son. Soon Eli would be safe and free from these toxins. I whispered a prayer of thanks that my parents had offered their farm as a refuge. Their warm embrace was medicine for my battered soul. Yet the Stanhope's venom followed us even to this pastoral escape. Eleanor and Jackson barraged me with calls and threats, promising to take Eli away for good. As my son played happily with my father's baby goats, blissfully unaware of the battle raging over him, my mother spoke words that would shape the course of my vengeance. Avalon, you must go back. Record their threats, document their lies, gather allies. Only then can you defeat them and free Eli from their clutches forever. I realized she was right. I had to shift from victim to warrior, or they would hunt me to the ends of the earth. If protecting my son meant destroying those who sought to harm us, so be it. I now understood the power I held as mother of Jackson's prized heir. Checkmate was still possible, no matter how ruthless the opponents. Jackson had dealt the first blow, but I would strike the final one. This was now a game of kings and pawns, where survivors take the prize. My son's future happiness hinged on my next moves. Failure was not an option. Too much was at stake. The kings would soon face their downfall. Returning to the battlefield took every ounce of my courage. Jackson's mask of civility had finally fallen, exposing the monster that lurked beneath. Home was now a minefield of emotional traps and verbal assaults. But my mother's words armed me for the fight ahead. I knew what needed to be done. I began documenting their deceit like an investigator, recording conversations, keeping a detailed log of Eleanor and Jackson's threats and manipulation. Though still nursing my wounds, I found purpose in preparing for the trials ahead. Justice would be done, no matter how powerful my adversaries imagined themselves to be. During a tense family dinner, Eleanor's snide comments pushed me to the edge. That Harper girl Jackson took up with, I knew she was familiar. Wasn't she your little friend, Avalon? Bile rose in my throat, but I simply gave a tight smile. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. Jackson said nothing, suddenly finding his steak fascinating. After they left, I gently asked Eli about his time with his grandmother. The flower of innocence in his eyes wilted. She scares me sometimes, Mommy. Grandpa yells a lot, too. I don't like it there. His words ignited my fury once more. How dare they trample my son's fragile spirit and destroy the safety of his world? Jackson's mask fully fell away when I confronted him about his emotional abuse of our son. He shouted and slammed his fist on the table inches from my face. You turned my own son against me. I always knew you were inadequate as a mother. No wonder he prefers you. Eli began crying as his father raged. Seeing my son's tears, I swore Jackson would pay for every second of heartbreak he had caused. The next morning, as Jackson left on another suspicious business trip, I asked sweetly about his plans. His look of surprise at the sudden affection in my voice was satisfying. Little did he know I had installed tracking software on his phone and recording devices in his car. His villainy would soon be his undoing. My parents provided comfort from the emotional battlefield. Their embrace nourished my battered but unbroken spirit. Dad taught Eli to milk cows and make jam, simple joys that erased Jackson's poison. As I tucked my slumbering boy into bed, he murmured, "I feel safe here, Mommy." His peaceful sleep was answer to 100 prayers. When uncovering Jackson's location through the tracking software, I noted he had traveled to Harperstown for a suspicious overnight visit. The trap was set perfectly now. I could use his tryst as irrefutable evidence against him during divorce proceedings. Soon Eli and I would break free from these toxic chains forever. My chance for absolute victory was close at hand. I imagined Jackson and his mother utterly demolished by what I now held against them: videos, records, and witness accounts. They had played with fire by challenging me, never imagining the phoenix that could rise from my ashes. Now doom awaited them as karma prepared her devastating blow. My next family dinner was a viper's nest of passive aggression and thinly veiled threats. Eleanor made snide comments about my simple meatloaf, though just a year ago she had praised the same recipe. Jackson scrolled through his phone, not bothering to pretend interest in his wife and son any longer. I simply ate in silence, my quiet fury simmering beneath a mask of perfect calm. As I cleared the dishes after the tense meal, Eleanor cornered me. "Avalon, don't you realize you're preventing Jackson from reaching his full potential? The boy needs a proper partner, one from the right kind of family." Her words poured acid into my heart, but I did not flinch. I think a divorce would be best for everyone. Jackson has already found a more suitable match. At this final insult, something broke free inside me, a righteous rage against injustice that blocked out all fear. Meeting Eleanor's glare calmly, I replied, "If you try to take my son from me, I will reduce your entire family to ashes." Shock registered on her face. She clearly underestimated the strength a mother finds when defending her cub. Returning home, I ignored Jackson's drunken ramblings, mentally preparing for war. My nerves were iron. I felt no trace of doubt. Securing Eli's future meant annihilating my enemies by any means necessary. I had already endured the worst pain they could inflict. Their blows only honed my will to survive. I edited my documentation, tightening it into an impenetrable legal trap guaranteed to favor me in court. Jackson's credibility would be shattered, Eleanor's manipulation exposed. Justice would soon arrive on swift wings. Over the next weeks, I wore a disguise of normalcy while secretly meeting lawyers and a private detective to build my case. Arthur, an old family friend on the force, provided legal advice I knew Jackson would never see coming. Weeks of planning in secret were about to yield dark and brutal fruit. Soon after Jackson left for a work emergency, no doubt code for meeting Harper, I followed him at a distance in a rented car. As expected, he drove straight to her apartment where she welcomed him with a kiss. The sight turned my stomach, but I captured images to twist the knife during divorce proceedings. My evidence folder grew thicker by the day. When Jackson returned the next morning reeking of Harper's perfume, I calmly informed him I wanted full custody of Eli and would be seeking a restraining order. A satisfying flicker of panic flashed across his arrogant face. The predator had just realized he had become prey. My mercy towards him evaporated like dewdrops in this moment. All that remained was the satisfied hum of sweet revenge. Jackson exploded into wrathful threats when I revealed my legal plans, confirming once and for all the true ugliness festering within him. He slammed his fists and overturned furniture, spewing graphic ways he would make me suffer. As he raged, I simply tapped a button on my phone to start an audio recording. His venomous words would seal his fate in court. I stood motionless as his anger crashed over me like waves over a rock. When his tirade finally exhausted itself, I stepped forward calmly. "I once loved the man you pretended to be, but now I see the truth. You will never hurt me or my son again." Jackson's face contorted into a hateful sneer. "You poisonous witch! I should have crushed your spirit years ago. My mother always warned you would betray me." He turned and stormed away, no doubt seeking solace between Harper's sheets. I had known divorce would provoke his inner demons, but I welcomed the confrontation. The law would grant me sole custody the moment I presented a fragment of the evidence I now held against Jackson and Eleanor. Justice would be done. In the quiet aftermath, I noticed Eli watching from the hallway, holding his stuffed bear in fear. I enveloped my son in fierce love, sadness mingling with relief that he had witnessed his father's true colors. "Don't worry, my darling. We are going to be happy and safe soon. I promise." Our new apartment provided refuge as the divorce exploded into being. On my lawyer's advice, I took Eli and moved out quickly, leaving Jackson snarling threats in our empty house. The legal team efficiently turned my evidence against my husband and mother-in-law into an airtight case for full custody of my son. Meanwhile, Jackson spiraled into self-destruction, drunk and violent. His business trips to meet Harper did little to numb his rage at losing control of me and his prized son. His mother desperately tried to restrain his reckless behavior, fearing damage to her family's esteemed social status. But the foundations of her carefully curated image were cracking. Soon Jackson would bring the whole rotting edifice crumbling down. Harper tried calling me, stuttering apologies filled with excuses about Jackson manipulating her loneliness. I simply wished her well with a smile. She was not to blame for my husband's deceit. In truth, I pitied her, for Jackson would surely break her heart too once he had extracted all he needed from her, then toss her aside. Berating Harper would serve no purpose, so I focused on my true goal, severing all ties to my abusers. The turning point arrived during an ugly custody hearing, where my ironclad documentation and audio evidence demolished any defense Jackson tried to mount. As he fumed, Eleanor screeched accusations, and their lawyer sat in stunned silence. I maintained perfect, smiling calm. I had played the long game masterfully, luring them into revealing their own wretchedness before systematically destroying them. Soon Eli and I would be reborn from the ashes of the Stanhope's smoldering ruin. The day of reckoning arrived with poetical perfection on Thanksgiving. I had invited Harper along with Jackson and Eleanor, presenting the image of a perfect hostess. My real purpose was setting the stage for their final demolishment. I had told Harper part of the truth, that Jackson had deceived us both and was still clinging to her. But she foolishly insisted on seeing the best in him, still enchanted by his hollow charm. Well, her naive blindness would end today. My parents joined us, bolstering my drive for justice. My evidence file and lawyer's number waited in my room, ready for use. I had forwarded videos of Jackson's raging threats along with records of Eleanor's manipulation to key contacts as insurance. If I did not make it through today unscathed, their own ugliness would trigger mutually assured destruction. When the Stanhopes arrived, I received them warmly, playing the role of forgiving ex-wife to lure them into complacency. Jackson overplayed the charm while Eleanor critiqued the menu I had slaved over, predictably ungrateful. During dinner, I made sure to position Harper beside Jackson. My friend giggled and blushed whenever he whispered flirtatiously in her ear. Watching them, my family members bristled with outrage on my behalf. I gave them subtle signals to wait as baiting my trap. Justice would be served cold. Dessert was interrupted by the ring of Jackson's phone. He glanced at the screen and silenced it quickly. But my hawk-eyed mother caught a glimpse of the name Amanda with a heart emoji before it disappeared from view. I seized the moment, my fury channeled into an eagle's deadly resolve. Looking directly at Harper, I asked gently, "Jackson, darling, who was that calling?" All eyes froze on my husband as he gulped nervously. Turning to my friend, I continued, "Harper, do you know if Jackson sees other women?" My words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, because he certainly lied to both of us. As understanding dawned on Harper's face, her shock quickly morphed into humiliation and heartbreak. As she erupted in sobs, my family surrounded her in solidarity, while Eleanor watched in horror as her web of lies fell apart. Jackson sat mute and stone-faced at the unraveling of his schemes. The leading man had lost control of his plot. I ended the final act by placing my evidence binder on the table. As my parents comforted Harper, I calmly informed Jackson he would sign the divorce settlement immediately, granting me full custody. Refuse, and this evidence destroys what remains of your life. My words rang with cold authority. Justice had been served. In the aftermath, Jackson's world collapsed with satisfying swiftness. My evidence proved his deceit was far more extensive than I had even realized. The detailed records showed him shamelessly manipulating numerous women for money and status, with Harper and I as just two in a long string of victims of his scams. With his credibility and social standing annihilated, Jackson descended rapidly into recklessness. He was fired from his prestigious family firm after showing up drunk to an important client meeting. Reports soon surfaced of him getting into fistfights at bars and clubs. His engagement to longtime girlfriend Amanda ended bitterly amid cheating allegations. Eleanor, once so proud and domineering, became a social pariah, shunned for enabling her son's abusive behavior. The Stanhope family name lay in tatters. She retreated from public view, suddenly plagued by poor health with no one left to dote on her. My mother commented it was likely her heart had shriveled so completely that her body could no longer sustain itself. I felt no pity watching the old crone reap what she had sown. With the Stanhopes decimated, I focused fully on rebuilding my life with Eli. My divorce settlement allowed me to buy a lovely home near my parents, where Eli and I discovered tranquility once more. I returned to work at the local library, finding meaning in simple joys and community after years trapped in toxic chaos. My only lingering anger was towards the justice system that had allowed Jackson to inflict maximum damage on me despite mounds of evidence. The lawyer fees had nearly bankrupted me even as Jackson walked free with light penalties. I now understood how power and privilege stacked the odds, forcing victims to fight tooth and nail for basic dignity. Harper remained a steadfast friend, helping me advocate for legal support for abused women struggling to escape manipulative partners. Her warmth and loyalty proved she was a victim as well. Together we found healing and meaning. One morning I arrived early to open the library and noticed a delivery by the back door. A beautiful bouquet of flowers waited in a vase with an unsigned note reading simply, Please forgive me." I recognized Harper's handwriting immediately. We cried together as 8 years of pain and betrayal washed away, leaving only relief that the long nightmare was over. A week later, my lawyer informed me that several women allegedly assaulted by Jackson had successfully pressed charges against him based on my evidence. He now awaited trial behind bars. The country club playboy had lost everything from his kingdom to his freedom itself. Justice had caught up to him at long last, as I knew it would. Watching Eli dance carefreely at my parents' summer picnic, his laughter healing old wounds, I knew I had reclaimed what mattered most. The predators who once haunted us would never steal our joy again. The past was just a fading nightmare banished by the dawn.